Fernando, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, how
Welcome
are
to
you?
Korea and welcome to KOICA.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation.
It's quite an honor and pleasure for us to have you here. You're such an experienced development specialist, consultant, and journalist.
Thank you.
Please share your experience and insight with us today. First of all, we'd like to know about your country. So Spanish foreign aid has been evaluated and changed a lot for the last couple of years. So can you give us a big picture about the change of Spanish foreign aid recently?
Yes, well, thank you. The history of Spain and ODA is a very peculiar one. I think they have a lot of similarities with Korea in the sense that we were a recipient country and we were used to receive funds on our development process. And with the European Union, we have benefited from that quite significantly. And then we had an immature development agency which started to articulate their priorities. At first, as many countries started development cooperation, and as South Korea is going through now, it was tied aid, and through priority regional countries where there was a certain priority of interests, commercial interests, and thus it was mainly focused on Latin America. I think that process was professionalized through the economic boom and with the socialist government in Spain. I think if there's a peak on how ODA is functioning better for the Spanish interest, was after 2004, when there was a big bet on increasing the multilateral funds for international organizations, diversifying the priority areas, and thus focusing a lot more on African regions and low-income countries, not only middle-income Latin American countries, and specializing thematically on the specific areas where Spain could add value to it. So I think there was a significant improvement from a strategic perspective on all that process, and there was a lot, especially a lot of questioning, a lot of thought in what could we add value, where we could add value, what is our lesson learned from developing as a country, and from that lesson learned, what we can provide the world. You know? And some very interesting areas came through, like for example, the decentralization process. As we're a small country, but we're a very complex, diversified, autonomous community country. I'm personally, we're Catalan.
Local governments.
Local governments, regional governments, and now we're on this re-questioning the model of Spain.
Right.
All that process seemed to be very valuable in the learning thoughts on how to apply to Africa and how countries are being constructed in Africa. So there was a lot of initiatives towards the decentralization process of countries and regions. And the other area was having more presence in international organizations. Before working, having my own company, the Center of Partnerships for Development, I worked for the UN for 8 years, and I was working on consulting on development issues. And it was always surprising to see how little the Spanish community was in international organizations. They were never very present. That has changed a lot. So I think that this process describes like the ODA peak of Spanish role, and I think it had certain positive impacts on specialization, on more presence of Spanish people, and prioritizing which countries to provide aid with, going, let's say, from Latin America. Regretfully, many things happened after this peak, as you all know, among them the global economic crisis, and among them the Spanish collapse of the economy in many fronts, which also collapsed completely the ODA agenda. And currently, I'm not sure if we could say we have an ODA agenda. I mean, we've decreased to 0.14 from, the last figures were from 0.5. I think the highest peak we reached was 0.454 of GDP, and now the last Oxfam ODA report, we're falling on 0.14. I think it's one of the lowest ODA data Spain ever had since we had an ODA agenda. I think it would be very easy for me to be very critical from a development expert and from a development activist, I would say, on why it has decreased, etc. Putting it into perspective, I think that knowing that we have a 25% unemployment rate, almost 50% with youth, that our exports have decreased so much also, that the economic investments of FDA has reduced a lot, I think this reduction is not only an ODA perspective. This reduction has been cut among all public expenditures. And I would say it's almost natural. Maybe it went too far beyond, almost natural. However, my questioning is more what's going to happen next. Because we went through a golden age with a lot of thought. A lot of Spanish professionals returned to Spain and they started working with Spanish public institutions, talented professionals, which before they didn't come, they went to private sector. And started working among the ODA sector. Then the collapse, and a lot of people went back to private sector or went back to leave Spain. And now that we'll go back to a normal area, my question is what's going to happen with the ODA agenda? I think we have a lot that we've learned. I think that from this process of increasing a lot very quickly and decreasing a lot very quickly, there's this question that all us professionals think about is what are we good at? And where's the Spanish added value serving other countries? And I think we're more mature now than before to provide those responses. We do need a little more time to recover economically and be able to be contributors, but I think we'll be there. And I, as a Spanish and Catalan, I think that we do have a significant added value, and I think we will be able to contribute significantly to the ODA market.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, you have mentioned the decrease of Spanish ODA, but it's going to be a global trend when we are experiencing the significant shrink of the public funding. But meanwhile, on the other end of the spectrum, there is a significant private funding increasing for developing countries. So we see Spain only started, but I'm sure that as you mentioned, the Spanish value will continuously focus on the development effectiveness.
Exactly.
And you have hinted out the local government's presence in the Spanish ODA, which is very new for us. But as far as I know, Spanish local authorities have long maintained organic relationships, many developing countries, especially in Latin America.
Yeah.
For instance, Catalonia with Cuba, Castilla with Central America, for instance.
Yeah.
So how do central authorities maintain the harmonized mechanism in this fragmented future of the ODA? Do you dialogue each other, I guess? Yeah.
Yes, of course. And it's a very good question, which does not have an easy response. But it's the key question, you know, how decentralized cooperation can be managed and how can it add value together. No? Because at the end, we see that a lot of the economic growth being generated, it generates in certain specific areas. Cities are becoming one of the biggest economic growth entities. Yeah. And supra-cities, megapolis, or municipal governments that include several cities are also developing significant economic growth, and regional areas, subnational, no? Regional areas also. And all of them are solidarity. They want to express solidarity. And they want to give money. And so there's ODA being generated there that is available to have a significant impact. How does it align to not overlap and not collide and have significant impact? It's a very, very pertinent question. And I say there's no easy answer because in my opinion, Spain has not been very good at managing it today, so far. There's been overlaps, and there's been a lot of regional interests that collide. We've seen cases like when there's an emergency, it's like what we say in Spain, la prueba del algodón, the test of the cotton. When you see if the windows are dirty, you pass the cotton, the white cotton, and if it's dirty, it's clear that the cotton is going to take so emergency assistance when a tsunami comes or when there's a big emergency is what tests how ODA works. And in these senses, there's been a collision. Like we have cases where in Indonesia, where in Latin America, in Haiti, you would have 6 or 8 public Spanish institutions represented with similar thematic agendas to be funded, and all there with budgets, you know. And the poor recipient who has to benefit from that is like, wow, like how I deal with all of them, you know. However, there are solutions, and I think that, as you were saying before, decentralized cooperation has a huge future, because countries, states are not going to be able to manage so efficiently funds. And a lot of the funds, every time more we tend to a decentralized management of funds. And I think that the key question is to balance between the added value and direct impact.
Yeah.
And in that sense, we have like two ways. You know, cities and regions can provide direct funding sources to international organizations and have also more presence there. But at the end, I think the questioning, which already was going on among states, you know, why is South Korea specializing in rural agriculture, ITC, and education? Because you've gone through it, and you have a very good experience in it. I think regions have also to think that process, and when you are an ODA decentralized region, and you come to the global world to say, we want to help Africa, we want to help Latin America, you have to be very competitive in what added value you bring, because at the end, you know, either you match funds with others and you just be a fund provider, but if you want to be a significant added value provider, that's the question. Again, resuming, in Spain we're not there yet. I think that process is not aligned to a state central efficient way, but what we have already done is that every region has thought a lot what they're good at and what they can provide funds to. And that specialization we have. Madrid maybe is not too happy about it.
Every region somehow has maintained 500 years of relationship with the recipient. So, well, you will, however, as the professional way of delivery of aid gets deepened, then it'll be a little more tricky to harmonize each other. I mean, they are superb in terms of aid delivery, especially in many countries in Latin America.
Yes.
Anyhow, and also you have briefly mentioned the problems in the Spanish financial crisis affecting the foreign aid budget, but you have a very active private sector, especially, again, investing in Latin America.
Yes.
So what we have in statistics is, since the financial crisis of Spain, Spanish foreign direct investment have increased significantly. Also, flow of qualified Spanish human resources to Latin America has increased a lot as well. So that could be quite interesting as well to compensate for the lack or decrease of an ODA. So in this regard, I'd like to know about the most private sector activities in Latin America from the angle of social development. So which is kind of reflection of companies' responsible activities, what we call this is corporate social responsibilities, CSR. I'm sure that's another specialty of Fernando. So how things are going in Latin America by Spanish companies?
Yeah, very good question. Thank you for it, because it's a question that I actually studied a lot, and we've published a few books about it. Specifically on the role of CSR on Spanish companies in Latin America. And I think that the relation has been very positive. And again, I think it's good to see it from milestones, no? From different phases, historically. No? I think before the 90s, it's a phase where there was not so much investment, and a lot of the big Spanish companies today, the big multinationals or the traditional ones, were public, like Telefónica, Repsol, the ones who first went to Latin America. And they started a privatization process in Spain. That led them to have a lot of accumulated capital, which, and they started to realize the market in Spain is very small. And at the early 90s, but in 3-4 years, there was a huge expansion of Spanish companies in Latin America. For the first time, Some Latin Americans called it el desembarco, or the new colonization, corporate colonization, in a more critical way. But there was, like all the Spanish companies from the if you look at the statistical figures from the late of the 80s to the 1993, 1994, the investments, they multiply by 60, and it's where all the big companies start establishing there. The process creates a very, very positive, and I would say mutual benefits in many places, in many areas of economic joint growth. And the Spanish companies benefit, a lot of them, to a point, as you were describing, even before the crisis. Some companies were already having more revenue in Latin America than in Spain. So Spanish companies, that their income, their turnover, was biggest percentage was the region of Latin America, more than the income they generated in Spain. And I think that that relation has increased a lot, and with the economic crisis, even more, So I think that the presence has been very, very big and has helped a lot the Spanish economy. From the other perspective, you ask, what has it benefited the Latin American perspective? And we did a report in many countries of Latin America to see how Latin Americans perceived the Spanish company and whether they felt comfortable with it and whether there was an ex-colonial relationship, negative or positive. So we did a very in-depth survey and say, what do Latin Americans think of corporate Spain? And to our big surprise, we thought we would expect more critical views. The perception was very good, very good. We compared other nationalities, and Spain was the second most popular foreign corporation in the region. This study was done in 2007, so the crisis hadn't hit yet. First one, interestingly enough, was the German companies, and a lot of countries prefer to work for Spanish companies than for their own Latin American companies, so that was positive. Then the crisis came, and I think that I would get into the CSR agenda because I think it was also very interesting how once the crisis hits, corporations are very quick shortening budget. If ODA shorts quick, corporations even more. They cannot lose money in 1 quarter, in 4 months. So there was an immediate impact on their investments, the projects, the resources and all. And the CSR agenda had been floating among the board of directors. It had been increasing slowly in Spain to a very significant degree. At the beginning of the year 2000, Spain entered the GRI, the UN Global Compact, and suddenly it became the country that had the most companies affiliated to Global Compact in the world when they joined. Everybody joined, and there was a huge enthusiasm about CSR policies. It even became a law in Parliament, and there's a committee in Parliament with multi-party participation that discussed CSR issues. So they really took it seriously from many fronts, but there was a huge critical community saying this functions because we are growing economically. The moment the economy stops, CSR is going to go down the drill. It's not going to be interested anymore. This is only a luxury that companies allow themselves. And Latin America was the mirror. Right? All the companies say, okay, they all had like the little foundation and their project here and the project there. But they say as soon as money shorts, it's going to cut out. Then the crisis came, the moment of truth. And in that moment is when everything that we had worked, I was working a lot on the CSR agenda, that we had worked was at stake. It's either falling or exists. And in my opinion, and this is very personal, I think it survived and it became even more important because of how the CSR agenda has evolved. It ended up, as you have followed a little the agenda, with coming from a philanthropic perspective, with a very corporate philanthropy, to a more public relationship. When it ended up being a foundation and it started going in the board of directors, it became managed by the public relationship or marketing. It's all the corporate branding. To a more strategically CSR, saying, this is good for us. It's not only a reputation aspect, it's improving how we relate to our suppliers, our distributors, our clients, and they start to see it more strategically. And I think that through the crisis, what was clear is that a corporation in a sea of inequality, in a sea of poverty, cannot maintain themselves. You cannot maintain a corporation as an island. And I think that slowly, slowly, Spanish companies understood that their future, because of the income, how it has shifted also, is linked to the future of the economy of Latin America. And if they want to succeed in that economy, they have to succeed with the people and with the community. You know, that ended up shifting certain attitudes that the Spanish company had. For example, they reduced a lot Spanish personnel. They start putting a lot of Latin American professionals, which are very talented. A lot of them have very good education and are very well prepared. So they start running the firms there. They're starting creating not like pilot CSR projects on the side, but CSR committees, stakeholder committees with civil society leaders to be advised by the civil society how to drive their investments, how to develop this framework, you know. So I think that the whole evolution of CSR in the world in general has been positive, has been more aligned with the corporate strategy, and Spain has gone through it also. No? So they've followed and in certain cases led this momentum. So I think that today the Spanish companies in Latin America are more hybrid, are more participatory, are more aligned with the Latin American economy and professionals. And I think in general they're well perceived. That hostility that we could see at the early 90s of they're coming, you know, or they're here again, I think has been lost a little. And to my interest, and now we've been writing also some articles and research studies on the opposite, the concept of trans-Latinas, and how Latin American firms are increasing a lot their presence, and they're investing in Spain. Now we have the Ibero-American Secretariat, which looks at corporate relationships upon the regions, and we have IDB in Europe that they were based in Paris. Now they moved to Madrid. So I think the whole relationships are getting better, and a lot of Latin Americans are seeing Spain as an entry point to Europe. So I think it's a win-win for both.
Very good. So why don't you give us a concrete example of strategic CSR of some of the Spanish firms, how their business are related or aligned with strategic CSR activities?
Okay, for example, I could mention one big bank in Latin America that has a lot of presence, PwC의. Bilbao, yeah. They are actually had a foundation, and it was a foundation that increased a lot of microcredit, from the microcreditors.
Right.
And it ended up being, 2006, the biggest foundation on the world investing in microcredit. They did it not from a pure philanthropic, but a lot of their CSR was channeled there, and it was managed through the foundation. However, their increase in Latin America has made them become more popular, and they've seen that microcredit as a market is a very potential market for them. So they've used this kind of foundation philanthropic approach in a more strategic way, and a lot of the services they're providing to their top end base of the pyramid market, they're adapting it to the microcredit market, but because there's a lot of profitability, not because it's being philanthropic, you know. Another example, some of the electric companies, which have done many mistakes in the region, don't get me wrong, but one of the areas that they've been investing, like Gas Natural, Iberdrola, even Endesa, is providing energy access to low-income communities, especially like in rural areas where public infrastructure and public investments would not get there. And they did that more from a philanthropic perspective. Oh, as we're getting such a public utilities of the city in Peru or Lima, you know, let's put a little on the side and give electricity to this poor community, and we can publish it in our CSR report and it will look nice. However, they realize that a lot of the low-income communities are underserved from an electricity capacity, not because of their unwillingness to pay, but because of their lack of access and how the structure of the business model they had created. They didn't have the proper regulators on los contadores.
Yeah,
And the consumer, family consumer per contador, per unit of charge, did not work there because there was a highly unpaid community. However, they started to create cooperative systems on how together they could pay the electricity.
Yeah.
And they start creating community leaders that were in charge of accessing and distributing the electricity. Latin America is one of the countries that they steal more electricity, from the cables. They say it's very hard to figure it out, but they say almost 40% of the electricity that circulates gets stolen.
Yeah.
So they start identifying who is stealing electricity. The poor always pay, that also. It's not a question that the poor didn't pay, but they pay to the mafias that stole the electricity on the favela economies. So they start identifying those who were able to do it, and they start hiring them to distribute the contadores in a cooperative model style. With this, a lot of this initiative, which started more like a philanthropic, let's help these poor communities get electricity, they realized they were expanding their market to a 40% loss of unpaid communities, making a participatory approaches where the communities got more engaged and they increased revenue for all, There's like a few examples that have a...
That's pretty interesting. That reminds me of Hernando Soto, the famous the formalization of informal economy. So Spanish firms were contributing in this sense. So.
De Soto had very good ideas, and I think he's a well-respected economist. Maybe I think that people have heard him too much. Certain economists are good in a dimension, but when they think they're the solution for everything, they get a little lost. I am a little critical with some of them. If you want, I can mention them, but De Soto, I think that he kind of adopted this philosophy that if you become an entrepreneur, all the problems will be solved. And with this philosophy, a lot of policies have been made, which, the poor, they have to be creative, be entrepreneurs, and sometimes you have to say, well, hold on. First, they need to eat and have electricity and proper education. Entrepreneurship is not going to solve global poverty now. But he has very good approaches, and I think it's
unless we solve all other enabling environments, it wouldn't work.
Exactly.
So we got a bunch of friends here sitting here interested in corporate social responsibility. So why don't we invite a couple of questions from the floor?
Okay.
Okay, we have a group of people interested in corporate social responsibility. So why don't you invite some of them for questions?
I'll receive any questions.
Yes.
Thank you for your interview. I'm very impressed about your thought and your experience. And actually, I'm now interested in CSR, and we are now make our own project related to CSR. And your organization, CAD, identify itself as a platform, right? So what is exactly platform for your organization means that?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I reply one by one, right? Yeah, the Center of Partnerships for Development organization is we call it platform because what we've done is defined what kind of needs there are in terms of the development cooperation agenda from a multi-sector approach, from a cross-sector approach, and provide solutions to those needs, right? So one of the reasons why we started existing was because we realized that there's a big public sector with a lot of ODA developing projects, and they have especially funds and access to the institutions, the platforms, etc. Then, as Professor was saying, there's a big, vigorous private sector, which a lot of innovation, also a lot of investments, generating employment and thriving the economy. And then there's a civil society, which is focused more on rights, on demanding equal rights and implementing projects from a rights perspective and acting as a watchdog to the private and the public. But we realized that among these three, they didn't talk to each other a lot. And a lot of the projects were designed and implemented without this model, without them interacting too much. So we thought there are a lot of people who go from one place to the other, who works in a company and then works in a government and then works in an NGO. And the professionals of the development sector, we are constantly transitioning among institutions, private, public, NGO, a lot. But when we get to an institution, we put the hat of whoever's institution is, public, private, social, and we still don't talk to each other. So our concept of platform was a practitioner platform of experts on partnerships that have experience in either of the sectors to create hybrid governance systems that make development more efficient. So our vision is more than a company, is to create like a platform of people. Some of them work with us, for us. Some of them work, they would be what in a traditional economic model would be the client. You know? We say we don't work for clients, we always only work for partners. And for us, a person who's managing the funds of COICA, who wants to hire us to do a project, we wouldn't say he's our client, we say he's a partner on which we want to work with and develop a joint platform, a joint impact, sorry. So for us, platform is the pool of practitioners that we believe have a common vision, and we're working aligned to make that vision push through.
Okay. Another question is that how that kind of platform can be formed at the starting level. I think it is not that easy to manage the different kind of organization into one platform because they have different interests.
Yeah, partnership building is complicated, and it's easier to do from a project-based. Like if you have a project, and it can be a very global project, you know, like a specific goal, it's easy to engage organizations than to create just a platform as a business model, no? But I think the first step is to identify what brings us together, what is the common goal. And if you think about it, we have much more in common, and we have much more to win aiming at common goals than differences. One of our key projects at CAD is designing, articulating, incubating, and implementing partnerships, these hybrid models, right? And for us, the big challenge is always, what's the vision? Why a public organization needs to partner with a private one to achieve an objective? You know, what is the vision and what is the impact? Once you see what they have in common, which is always our first step, you know, what they have in common, I think it's much easier to align them together and work on a specific agenda. But going a little beyond your question, I would like also to emphasize that people think working in partnerships is very easy because it's like, oh, I just work with Samsung and COICA, they can work together. You know, it's just, I mean, obviously, in Africa they have many things to win. You put them together and they make an action plan. Our experience, having worked on now 10 years with CAD and before, is that it's very complicated. And you need standardized tools and methodologies to plan every single step. And there are methodologies available, we use them, and it reduces a lot of risk and makes you win a lot of time. Because working with different cultures, as you were saying, is very complex at the end.
Other questions?
Thank you for your interview. We are currently studying the CSR, and we're thinking of making a CSR platform in Korean society.
Oh, nice.
Yes. Many Korean corporations are doing the CSR by themselves.
Okay.
Separately. So we'd like to aggregate their efforts together, and we think that your organization is a good model to adapt to Korean society. So to implement the platform, what could be the environment for Korean society to have?
Okay.
Any preconditions for
Yeah.
ideal platform formation?
I mean, it's very interesting what you say, and we've seen that, and we've helped create this kind of platforms in Spain and in Latin America. Latin America, there's a lot of initiatives, but they've associated themselves first within each country, and so each country has like their own national platform for CSR, and then regionally. There's an initiative, I can give you all the data because I know them, all of them very well, but empresa.org is the regional association of CSR national platforms, and they are represented from a regional perspective. Within empresa.org, if you go to their website, you will see that each country has their own national platform, and each platform is represented in a multi-stakeholder approach. I think that that model works. It's complex, but it works. So, answering to your question, look what's been done abroad, and from a Korean perspective, I think the best way to function is to choose very well the champions. And a champion could be the CSR director of a corporation, which is what normally people tend to look for. You know, oh, who's the CSR responsible and Samsung? No, we're going to look for him. You know, but not always they are the best champions. You know, like a champion can be a civil society leader. A champion can be a public policy maker that understands, because ODA is decreasing, that a public budget has to be merged with private funds and is creating policies to combine them. You know, like champions can come from many different parts. So spend time identifying the structure. Identify, for example, and try to start a little small. 5 to 10 companies, 5 or 10 social organizations, or 5. A few universities. Universities are very good providing knowledge, and these platforms need knowledge. You will find out when you move that there's a lot of questions to be raised. You know, if we apply this policy that we used in Spain, how is it going to affect our economy here? And you know, researchers, we love doing that in a way. You know, spending time thinking the pros and the cons. And then public institutions, I think, as a society. South Korea, I think it would be good to engage the government in order to make them drive, or at least combine their vision on how this can be articulated. You know, so identifying who to belong to the first group is very important. And what we've seen is what works best is create a pool and start meeting together and defining common objectives. What do you want to provide? A lot of these platforms provide support to the organizations to drive the agenda forward. Sometimes they end up being consulting firms, which creates contradictions. The ones that I see functioning more, they're member associations. So the platform provides certain added value in terms of knowledge generation, etc., and members pay a fee to be part of it. Others, they're completely free, and they join for a mission. That maybe the government is against CSR, or they don't want to do a policy, and they unite and say, okay, let's all together 1 year, we're going to do this campaign, and we're going to convince society and the government how needed this is, you know? So there's different purposes in terms of goals, but the best is when it starts small, and you look at committed people. Sometimes it's better the leader of a small SME, very active in the platform, than the representative CSR of the biggest company in the country, you know. And platforms that have always put more attention to the names than to the motivation of its members tend to fail or go much slower. You know what I mean? It would be very tempting. Oh, we have the 10 best CSR directors of the best 10 companies. But if they meet and they don't do nothing, it's better to have small SME managers that are wanting to change things, you know. So the selection process is very good, very important.
Okay, last question is there.
It is very easier to think that corporations all different corporations have their own agendas and their self-interests. And then we're thinking about a platform that corporations take initiatives together, like even in solving one problem, it can be many other things, but what can be the motives, or maybe when we want to not advertise, but just what could be the incentives for corporations to participate in such model that we are thinking about?
Yeah, there's one thing that corporations need to understand, and some of them they have not understood it yet, is that they are not, should not, and will never be NGOs, you know? And I don't think they have to be, because with the whole CSR momentum, sometimes they get confused, and they think that they're very good doing their economic activity, and then they have to be excellent NGOs working with low-income communities, for example. You know? And that's not their task. And a lot of companies that have aimed to do that solo, they failed. And this is a very delicate area because there has a very quick boomerang effect. If a company does not do CSR and just do the business, let's say put bottles of water in the market, and they do it well, people are not going to bother with them too much. If they put bottles of water and then they start publicizing a lot that they're improving the community with the CSR and they're helping the woman in the rural areas, whatever, people are going to pay attention. And if they're doing that wrong, they're going to criticize them. And that critic is going to affect how they sell their bottle of waters. So if you don't get it right, don't publicize it. Don't publicize it. And the success of doing what they do good, selling products and putting them on the market, is very different from empowering communities and solving global poverty, which means that they need partnerships and they need platforms to help them work together with those groups that are experts doing that. And I think there's a lot of knowledge in governments that have been working on a public and social agenda for years, and a lot of knowledge on social organizations that maybe they're more critical, maybe they're not as organized, maybe they're not so results-oriented, but they have been dialoguing with the community for ages. I think it can be a big mistake to ignore that knowledge and try to do things on their own way. And I think the biggest argument for them is precisely this: you're very good at what you do, we can provide you the people, the resources, the tools, and the methodologies of people who are working on the social impact. So together, not instead of you, but together we can do this better, you know? And I think that most of the companies, they acknowledge that. They began very free riders, all of them, and at least in Latin America and Spain, they all went back and said, you know, we cannot do this alone, we shouldn't do this alone, we need the experts on social development to guide us, we can put this money, we want to work in partnerships, we don't want to be left out of the decision making, we want to be there, but we need those professionals to guide us through it. I think when they reach that level of maturity, it's perfect for this platform. And if they're not there yet, you have to convince them that you're going to save them make many mistakes.
One last
Okay.
question.
Go ahead.
So is there any, while we were doing research, there were many organizations and associations that call themselves as CSR platform. And is there any a good example of CSR platform that is mainly organized by corporations, their own?
Yes.
Is there any good example?
Yeah, many. They end up always engaging a little circle of social advisors or experts, you know. But there are, and like Reputation Institutes, they have. I can give you some names of groups. In Spain, they've done it through a cross-sectoral approach. Like they've integrated only companies and like the top 2 companies of each sector, for example. In Latin America also, the biggest one I would say would be the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. They've started to engage some NGOs as observers, but they're mainly a corporate-driven agency. International Business Leaders Forum, which now changed to Partnering Initiative, but they've been a corporate platform for very long. And so there are significant examples that I can pass to you. And I think it's better from a cross-sectoral, but it's legitimate to do it from only corporate. And there are good examples with some good lessons learned also. You know? For example, one of the things that these groups do have is, from a purely corporate perspective, is to think at their common challenges. And then when they say, okay, we need an NGO to help us, they talk about it together. And that reduces a lot the speculation of other groups working with them. You know? So there are some advantages in that. You know?
Okay, I think we are more or less done with the CSR so far. But I have a couple of some like casual,
Okay.
informal questions for you. You are an experienced development consultant. You've been running CAD for the last 10 years. What's the most difficult thing in your business?
Wow. Okay. That's an interesting part. I mean, I have to say that there's many replies.
Yeah,
It'd be interesting also to hear what
Could
Paula
be
has to say.
diplomatic reply or realistic
No.
reply.
I'm not diplomatic. I've learned not to be diplomatic because when I try, I fail. So.
No, don't worry.
No, but I have many answers. And I would say that maybe Paula, who has suffered cat with me at home, would also be able to reply. But I think there are two major ones.
Yeah.
Okay. One is the entrepreneurship side of leading a company, and I think it relates to any kind of company.
Yeah.
And I would like to say that the loneliness, the solitude of making decisions, you know, because
As an owner,
I mean, now we engage friends and partners, and now we grow. But at the end, for the first 3-4 years, every single decision came down to one person. And sometimes you don't know if it's the right person, decision, and it has consequences. And sometimes, like at the beginning, creating CAD, I remember many times I was like, oh, I wish a mentor came from the sky, like someone, the professor with white hair, and tell me what to do at each moment, But you couldn't, and I talked to very intelligent people asking for advice, even my parents who are worked in economic development and they're entrepreneurs in a way themselves, but they never had answers. No one told you what to do. They told you, if you do this, maybe it's better, and those decisions at the end, it's tough because whatever you endeavor, you have to have the capacity of one, you're going to be very lonely, a lot of times, and you're going to make decisions that you don't know what's going to happen. However, there are solutions to every challenge. In this case is don't think much of the failure that can occur with one of your decisions. Think on the quick recovery. And this is something we've applied a lot. Like when you're going to make a decision, say, okay, if I do this, maybe it's wrong. But if it's wrong, how would I recover from it? What is the worst scenario of this consequence, and how can I recover quickly from that? And that reduces not only the risk, but also your feeling, So this is important, how to deal with decisions. And if you're always thinking of failing, you never move. And sometimes to grow, you have to make ambitious decisions. But think of quick recovery and not be obsessed on falling, be obsessed on how you're going to stand up quickly. The second one is about people, which I think is the common, how to engage people. And I think personally that I've been very lucky meeting and encountering people that shared my vision. Because we didn't want to become a very big company. We didn't want to become a hierarchical company. We were thinking more of a horizontal platform of freelancers working together. And we immediately saw that if we want big projects, we have to compete with, Pricewaterhouse, Ernst & Young, companies that have 1,000 employees all around the world, And as freelancers, we had to build together on a brand, And that kind of freedom, horizontal leadership, working together in a common approach was like a challenge, And I think I met very interesting people. And once you meet them, it's how to engage them properly. A lot of time when you create these companies is listening, sometimes you think you know all the solutions, but your partner is hesitating. And maybe those doubts will last a month. You have to sit down and go through every single doubt, spend a lot of time with people and knowing that they're empowered. Now we're in a different process because we've grown, and some of the people that I engaged originally are partners of CAD, so they're taking ownership. And now, as I'm traveling with my wife, I stepped a little out, and they're leading more the company, and it's worked very well. Wow. We want to see what we've learned through that process and replicate it more to empower more the employees who are working, and so they have more proactive role on the company as project managers. Yeah. This is our next step. How to create and empower project managers. But every year is a new challenge. This never stops. If you don't like instability, if you don't like we say montaña rusa, work for Koika maybe, I don't know. But entrepreneurship is always a challenge.
Okay.
You never reach a point where you're like, oh, now I did it. No.
All right. One last question. You have completed a book recently,
Yes.
and it's going to be launched in a minute.
Exactly,
I guess.
exactly, yes.
I guess it's related to the base of pyramid,
Yes.
BOP. So
Yeah.
why don't you introduce us a little bit?
Exactly. Thank you. Thank you for the
Yeah.
question.
Yeah.
So yeah, we just published the BOP 3.0 book, and it's the base of the pyramid 3.0, talking about innovation and entrepreneurship for sustainable development. And it's a big honor for me to publish it with Stuart Hart, which was one of the founders of the concept, with C.K. Prahalat. And he's written several books about the concept. Last one was around 3 or 4 years, which was called the Protocol BOP 2.0. And he did that with Simanis, Eric Simanis. And I remember when I was reading that book, I thought it was so interesting, but there's certain things missing, you know? And actually, I met Stuart in 2000, and I was very impressed about his speech. I liked a lot his vision of innovation. In 2006, 2007, we started to collaborate a little in a meeting we had jointly with Paula also in Paris. And when he published 2.0, I thought this is like the next innovation phase. There was a lot of excitement around it. And we created, well, actually he created, I then participated, the BOP Global Network, which is a network of 18, now it's 21 countries, country labs, like a platform of labs in each country. Actually, Korea does not have one. That's something to think, we could very easily create one. Who generate innovation for knowledge generation on BOP markets. No? And I thought, all the experience in each country, you know, I told Stu, maybe it's a time to stop and think about a third wave of BOP analysis, a 3.0 approach, with open innovation, open platforms, and participatory approach. You know? If BOP 1.0 was how to reach poor markets, how to reach communities that are below $88 a day and be able to sell them products. If BOP 2.0 is how to work with them and create participatory approaches in those communities with them. 3.0 is more about how to use open innovation platforms, open source, the biggest research and development laboratory that we have, that is the free internet, and all the innovation of people in the internet, how this applies, everything that's free, the share economy and the open economy, to improving the lives of the most poorest people in the world. You know? So it's using the best resources and the best technology and the best free minds, like Wikipedia, how all this has been created, applied to solving solutions. And it's, as you're saying, Professor, it's coming up now. It's going to be launched in a couple of weeks in the US, and we are personally presenting it in Vermont in July with Stuart Hart. So we're hoping that it has a significant impact, and we're really looking forward for its distribution.
Wonderful. I guess it's full of new innovative ideas and fresh examples.
Exactly.
So we
There's a
look
lot of
forward
examples.
to have it in Korea
Yes,
very soon
yes.
as well.
Excellent.
Right, Fernando, thank you very much for
Thank
your
you.
time and efforts to share your ideas and your experience in Korea. I hope you have a fruitful days
Yes.
while you're staying in Korea, and come back anytime. to
Thank you
us.
so much. Thank you for the interest, and thank you for those who are here asking and those that are behind the camera as well, which is something that I know quite a lot. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.